Welcome to all our ISM members and guests joining us for today's program for our Women in Empowerment series. A special thank you to our series sponsors, GSK and Corcentric. Be sure to ask our speaker your question using the chat or the Q&A tab. We will also have the availability, if you raise your hand, you can ask your question live, but you would need to raise your hand for that. Our program for today is on Forget the Fairy Tale, with our featured speaker, Kelly Nagle, who is the founder and chief impact officer of Kelly Nagle LLC. A little bit about Kelly. Kelly is an author, consultant, entrepreneur, political scientist, and self-empowerment expert. 4 years ago, Kelly had an epiphany while sitting at her kitchen table working on a research paper about human trafficking. She had dedicated her career to helping and empowering others in the nonprofit sector, and she was spending her time as a graduate student highlighting gender inequities in other parts of the world. But despite her work to empower women, Kelly realized that somewhere along the line, she had become disempowered herself. So Kelly started on a journey towards regaining her inner strength and confidence to become a healthier and happier person. While on her journey towards self-empowerment, Kelly realized two things. First, how much the unrealistic, culturally constructed fairy tales we absorb since childhood impact us and how they define our success and self-worth. And second, the kinder, more empathetic world, it's achievable until we each find true inner happiness and feel empowered ourselves. In 2019, Kelly followed her passions for personal development and empowerment into the entrepreneurial world. She founded Uncharted based upon her experience and toxic relationships and disempowerment to help clients build the skills they would need to defy also expectations and life's challenges and chart their own course to happiness. A year later, Kelly co-founded the Teen Think Tank Project. This is fascinating. A student-run policy institute that develops policy frameworks for social justice issues and empowers students to become future change makers. Kelly is also a philanthropy consultant providing strategic fundraising counsel to help clients achieve high performance goals. Kelly finished her MA from Rutgers University, yay Rutgers, in political science, United Nations, and global policy in January of 2020. She also holds a BA in history from Loyola University in Maryland. Kelly teaches political science at Brookdale Community College and is an author in 2 international best-selling anthologies, Living My Truth, Personal Reflections on the Impact of the RBG Legacy, and Engaging Experts, Your Guide to the People and Connections You Need to Go from Ordinary to Extraordinary. At this time, I'd like to put the stage over to Kelly.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak about a topic that's very close to my heart. And I really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy days and their busy lives to have these conversations, and looking forward to learning from you and hearing from you as well in the next hour. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so this was my fairy tale. All of these pictures represent my fairy tale. It was going to college, meeting someone, getting married, having a house, finding a job that I could keep moving up the ladder and keep making money. That was the fairy tale that got me to that moment in my kitchen when I realized that although I had devoted my time to fighting for others, particularly women who were disempowered, I had gone down a destructive path that left me a shell of myself. I was at that time in the process of ending a marriage that had caused me serious emotional and psychological trauma. I found myself to be irritable, constantly stressed, which created its own physical ailments, and incredibly insecure. And those feelings trickled into my work, and they impacted my ability to be confident and assertive in the workplace. And I even though I was trying to help people, I wasn't doing as much good as I would have liked because my energy was spent dealing with this inner turmoil. And the more I thought about it, I realized two things. All of the fairy tales I was surrounded by growing up were nothing more than culturally constructed ideals based on power and control. They're external factors setting unrealistic expectations against which we judge ourselves. And we're surprised that there's so much discussion about mental health these days, right? The second thing I realized is that many of our society's problems or inability to solve these problems stems from an individual lack of feeling happy or empowered. And I tend to look at this on a political level, but so much of the ugliness that exists in our government or the hatred that comes from people in power is a symptom of people dealing with their own inner struggles. People who are genuinely happy don't bully other people. People who have a strong sense of empowerment don't try to tear others down or control others. And the best way to change the world and create a kinder, more empathetic and cooperative society, I believe, starts with the individual. And we need to find inner happiness and empowerment before we can each be good members of society. Looking back at my life during my marriage, I could see how my inner turmoil and my loss of self-empowerment came out in not such great ways. I was short-tempered with people. I was more sarcastic and critical of others. I was super critical of myself. I panicked easily. I made snap decisions. And if I was stressed at home, I brought it to work, and vice versa. If I was stressed at work, I brought it into the home. I felt a loss of control over my own life, and I tried to regain that through micromanagement, which doesn't feel good to anybody. None of these things caused major damage, thankfully, but I can say I was showing up as the best version of myself and working to the best of my capabilities, either in the workplace or in my personal life. And I felt like I was merely surviving day to day than actually enjoying life and thriving. And so I realized I had to deal with my inner storm and find a sense of calm and regain my confidence before I could really have an impact on the world that I wanted to create. And so that started with confronting my inner thoughts and my inner beliefs. And so what I'd love to do over the next 40 minutes or so is identify some of these fairy tales that stress us out, that confine us to these ideas of what we're supposed to be doing and the benchmarks that we're supposed to hit to be doing well, to win at life. So let's call them out and take away their power. So do any of these look, feel familiar to you, right? This idea of having a perfect family, like this photo in the middle kind of encapsulates it all for me. Having blissful marriages, having these lavish weddings that are all over Facebook, and there are TV shows dedicated to them now, having well-behaved kids, having these perfect family photos on your social media, right? You're the PTA president and you're the carpool driver, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot to live up to, and it's this one-dimensional idea of what you're supposed to be as a family. And it seems like if you're not in a happy marriage with the perfect high-achieving kids, something's wrong with you. Or in my case, or other women that I'm close with, it's the pressure of if you're not having kids, there's something wrong with you, either by choice or because you struggle with infertility. Regardless, it's a lot of pressure to deal with day in and day out when the world is pushing this one perfect fairy tale type of family. Okay, moving on around to the other pictures. There's this pressure of being Martha Stewart, right? Hosting the perfect holiday dinners, having home cooked meals on the table for the family, the perfect entertainer. Those are the pictures that we see, that we absorb consciously or subconsciously, that we need to live up to. Holidays are right around the corner. How many of us are starting to stress out? I have to clean the house. I have to get the tree. I have to decorate the tree. I have to figure out the perfect meal and the china and the tablecloth. Oh, and I feel the weight on my shoulders just thinking about that. But that's what we see when we talk about hosting these dinners. We think about the commercials that you see, for cookware or for shopping markets or supermarkets, right? It's the idea of these big glamorous family dinners, and that has an impact. We observe that's what we're supposed to be doing. Moving on, the idea of this house with a white picket fence. You get married, you have a house with a white picket fence. As one woman that I'm close to pointed out, having to have a tidy, clean house, maybe with a white picket fence. There's a lot of pressure to have that perfect home in perfect condition, which if you have children, I'm sure that's even more difficult to achieve. Not sure if this picture resonates with anyone, but this idea of being super mom or superwoman, or you're holding down a full-time job, you're caring for children, maybe you're caring for parents also, keeping the house clean again, having dinner on the table, showing up for the school functions, hosting the birthday parties, right? Making cupcakes. It's my niece's 5th birthday today. I wanted to call her 8 o'clock this morning. My brother was like, dear God, no, it's so chaotic here. We're trying to get her dressed and with presents and out the door with the birthday stuff. Right. But we're expected to do all of this. You're a woman, you're a mom. These are just sort of innate things you're supposed to be able to do. Last one in the top corner, having a fun and interesting social life. We see social media, everyone's out at parties and vacationing, et cetera, et cetera. Is there something wrong with us if we're not doing that? Do we feel the pressure to live up to do that? So maybe you have some other thoughts, and if you do, please throw them in the chat of other fairy tale ideals, or social pressures that you feel we're supposed to be doing that are normal, that we need to take on as well. You throw them up there. I'd love to hear from you. When we get through these next few slides, I'll take a minute to look at some of the responses and share them. This is my work-life fairy tale board. Again, maybe some of these resonate, maybe you have some other ideas, but it was always this idea of chasing the next paycheck, the next promotion, right? Moving up the ladder, kind of at all costs. You want to go as fast as you can, as high as you can. You're straddling this line, especially for us women, maybe this resonates with others, between being a good, strong, effective boss, right? The ones who can sit across from men in that conference room and be heard and respected, but also, yikes, there's a very thin line between being too aggressive and too cold. And so constantly that pressure of walking that line. Can we just be ourselves? Well, no, we kind of live up to this ideal of our male predecessors, but we can't really be like them because then we're going to be seen as too cold and aggressive. So this fairy tale of there's a perfect way to do it. And then we project that fairy tale onto our bosses. And if they aren't exactly like we've been instructed to believe, there's a problem, right? How many people have social media accounts? You look around, people have fun, interesting, exciting, frequently updated social media accounts. They're vacationing. Again, their kids look perfect. They got the perfect Christmas picture. Everybody's staring at the camera and smiling. Right? How come I'm not going away? I'm supposed to be traveling. I'm supposed to be going out all the time. I'm supposed to be posting all of these interesting things. Right? That creates a fairy tale of what life is supposed to be like. One of my favorite is this idea of quitting your job and traveling the world to write a blog. No offense to anyone who's actually doing that. I think it sounds wonderful, but also it's this fairy tale of we can just quit our jobs and make a ton of money and survive, financially traveling around the world. So we're absorbing these ideas of what others are doing and what this fairy tale is and the benchmark that we've set for ourselves. And my last fairy tale slide is about wellness and appearance. And I'm sure a lot of women can appreciate that this pressure to look a certain way, killing ourselves trying to hit a certain weight or have a certain exercise regimen or striving to look like this idea of the perfect woman that's been put out there. I mean, I don't even know what that means anyway. But this idea of glamour and wealth and sex appeal that we see in the Kardashians and other reality shows, and we're glamorizing conflict and drama and wealth. These are becoming the fairy tales that we feel like we're supposed to be chasing and living up to. And when we're not, that takes a toll on our confidence and our sense of empowerment. I do want to note that if any of the examples of the fairy tales that I put up here are things you genuinely love doing or believe in, then all the power to you. If you love to and you have the talent to create a Martha-esque, Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, then God love you. Please keep doing that. But if you're doing this only because you feel like you have to please your family or please society or post it on your Instagram page, then we have to break through that. So I'm just going to pause for a second here and see if there are any questions that I could possibly answer. Stephanie, they all resonate with you. Financial, yes. Great, hitting exactly on what you're feeling and dealing with. I really I really appreciate that. Glad that I'm not the only one, right, feeling these pressures. And again, if there are others that you feel are culturally constructed benchmarks and goals that we should be hitting, throw them in there. I'd love to learn from your experience and perspectives as well. Okay, so what can we do, right? We've called out some of these fairy tales. What do we do next? And so I'd love for you just to take a few minutes to think about that, right? What do you want to do, right? What really makes you happy? What's important to you? What are those values? Is it being surrounded by loving, nurturing relationships? Is it making enough money to feel financially stable? Think about the things that are really important to you. Is it carving out time for exercise or for just feeling healthy, however you define that? What are things that you don't want to do? Also, you do not want to host 50 people for the holidays. Write that down. Do you not want to work 60 hours a week and have no time for your personal life or your family? Maybe you don't want to look in the mirror and feel ashamed because you don't look like all the other women that are plastered all over social media. You're just tossing out some ideas here, but I just want to take a minute to ask you to close your eyes and think about what really makes you feel happy, joyous, energized, fulfilled, and what images come to mind when you picture those things. If I say, what really makes you happy? Is it sitting on a beach, reading a book? Is it sitting next to a loved one in your family and just spending quality time with them? Like, what does that look like? What does that feel like? And I want to kind of re-script the fairy tale into your own story. Right? So here's one example. Having a family, right? There's a lot around that fairy tale. You have to go find your partner and then get married, and you're automatically in love, and you have a family, and it's wonderful, and you go on vacation, and you take all these great photos and send them out on Christmas cards. And you have this idea of this fairy tale of a family. But that's sort of like the very static way of thinking about it. That's become the right way to do it. And if you don't find a partner, if you choose not to have kids, et cetera, there's a lot of societal pressure that causes stress because you're not living up to this idea of the fairy tale. It causes doubt. Right? So I'll share my personal story. I knew in high school that having children was not something I was going to aspire to. I did not aspire to be a mother. And for years, I grappled with that conflict because I was told that was wrong, that was against the fairy tale. Right? There's something wrong with me. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And people kept trying to shove me back to that fairy tale. And I grappled with that a lot because I didn't have the mindset yet to understand that I was making choices that were the best for me. And I was going to move forward and still create happiness and amazing relationships in my life in a different way than that fairy tale told me how to do that. And so now I think if you kind of step back from that fairy tale, there's so many different ways that you can have a family. You can achieve a family, just maybe not in that very image that I had on the previous slide. Or you can adopt, you can go through in vitro and have a child on your own. You can have amazing relationships with other children in your life that aren't your own children. There are other ways to re-script your story and still achieve the things that are valuable to you, but not necessarily on the pathway that the fairy tale takes us, right? So we're going to call out this fairy tale. We're going to identify what's truly meaningful for us, and we're going to find new ways to achieve it. So I'm just going to pause for one quick second and see if anyone would like to share, what's really valuable to them. Are there things that you truly value, the intangibles of these fairy tales, that we can start to reframe our mindset that we're still winning at life, we're still doing well, we're still achieving and fulfilling. We're just breaking out of the mold of the fairy tale that tells us how to do that. If you're comfortable sharing that, I'd love to hear from you. If you're not, and hopefully you're thinking about that at your desk or your home office or wherever you are, to help us start to create a new mindset, rescript our story, and write our own narrative. Okay, so we're rescripting our story, but the world is still going to tell us that the fairy tale is real. Fairy tale is the way to do it. That's the North Star. That's what we're supposed to be moving towards. So we're going to need to build up the skills to be able to deal with all that, to still push back against the fairy tales that aren't going anywhere, the people who are still believing in them. But how can we move forward with our new story that feels really good to us, with the skills that we can deflect and we continue to defy those fairy tales? So first, you need to catch yourself. Right? You need to catch yourself when that fairy tale is creeping back in and starting to dictate your life. And you know what this feels like, or you know these feelings. You feel stressed, or you feel overwhelmed, you feel anxious, you feel sad, maybe you feel angry. And one of these pictures on the screen really resonates with you. And what happens when you feel this way? Right? You lose patience, you revert to bad habits, you stop taking care of yourself. You're ultimately not showing up as your best self. For me, I know when I'm feeling extra stressed, I am short on patience. I get tension in my neck, my back, my stomach gets very unsettled. I tend to stop exercising. I tend to go for like the sugar and the carbs, and I forget all the other healthy foods that I like to keep into my diet. I feel super quick to snap at my partner or a colleague. To me, those are sure signs that I am dealing with some internal conflict. That is my body's way of telling me, time out. This is not normal. Stop just proceeding forward in these emotions. You need to figure out what's going on. I have to step back and assess what is underneath all of this anger and stress. Why do I feel so quick to snap or be sarcastic at someone? It probably has nothing to do with them or anybody else. It is me. There's something going on. So catch yourself feeling these emotions. Instead of pushing through them and just saying, well, my partner's doing this, and that guy cut me off, and I'm just going to get to the end of this week when all these deadlines are due, and then I'm going to feel better. Just stop. Acknowledge that your body's sending you a message. Listen. Check in to see if it's this fairy tale stirring up trouble, right? Are you beating yourself up because you didn't live up to somebody else's expectations? Maybe you're taking on too many responsibilities at work because you don't want to disappoint people. You don't want to tarnish that image of supermom or superwoman. You're feeling that stress of, I'm supposed to keep moving up the ladder and get that next promotion. And you're feeling stressed because you don't think that you're doing that. Catch yourself in that moment. Identify that fairy tale that's wreaking havoc and go back to your own story about what is important to you. Right? So really important, catch those emotions, let them be the giant red flags, say stop, take a breather, figure out what's going on. We're our own worst critics. And most of the time it's because we're killing ourselves to live up to the expectations of this fairy tale. So after you catch yourself feeling these emotions, the next step is to think kinder thoughts about yourself. Identify that negative internal voice that's always saying cruel things to you and make a conscious effort to quiet it. Right? Good rule of thumb, if you wouldn't talk to the most beloved person in your life like that, don't talk to yourself like that. Right? So next step, take care of yourself. Self-care is an act of kindness, and I am a huge advocate for self-care. It's essential to maintain our mental, our physical, and our emotional health that we need to do the amazing things in the world that we want to do, right? Maybe you want to beat climate change. Maybe you want to overhaul our justice system. Maybe you're not a political science nerd that I am, and you just want to show up and do the best that you possibly can at work, the best you possibly can with your family and your friends. You cannot do that if your mental, emotional, and your physical health is struggling. Self-care does not have to be too expensive or time consuming. So many times we talk about self-care and we think about day spas and spa retreats and all these lofty vacations. Those are nice. They're not realistic, right? Step back from the fairy tale. Nobody's really doing that on a regular basis. Get rid of that fairy tale. But there are some simple activities that you can do to take care of yourself that are all self-care. For example, plan your schedule to get quality sleep. Whatever you have to do, get to bed and try to get 6, 7, 8 hours of quality sleep. right? Get up and take a walk, even if it's 20 minutes. It is amazing what stepping away from your computer will do and getting the blood flowing for your creativity and your productivity. You can spare 20 minutes. I promise you, your work, your colleagues will thank you. Make a conscious effort to eat healthy and nourishing foods, right? I don't know about you, when I'm stressed, like I said, bam, sugar, carbs, right? High calorie things, it just makes you feel better. It's not doing much good for your mental and your physical health. So try to make a really conscious effort to eat healthy foods. Super simple, we have to eat anyway. Practice a little bit of self-care and eat those things that are really healthy for you. Drink some water. You will feel so much better when you're not bogged down by sugar and carbs and high blood pressure and or high sugar, et cetera, et cetera. Spend time with people who uplift you, especially if you're dealing with a high stress situation. You just plan time for coffee or even a 10, 15-minute phone call on the way home. That's an act of self-care. You're reaching out, you're connecting, you're nourishing your soul with people that you trust and you love. There's so many, many, many more. I could talk about self-care for hours, but the last one is the most important one, and that is to set boundaries. Setting boundaries is an extraordinary act of kindness to yourself, and not only to yourself, but other people around you, right? Boundaries protect your energy. They protect your mental health. They keep you true to your values and your intentions. And that's going to be so important. We just took a little bit of time to think about what is really important to you. What are your values? Boundaries are going to protect them, right? And when we have boundaries, we feel calmer, we feel more in control, and we show up 100 times better for other people, right? Setting boundaries, sometimes a little bit easier said than done. Here are some ideas for setting boundaries, right? No, thank you. Right? No is a boundary. No, period, is a perfectly acceptable boundary. Say no, thank you. Right? Or I'm not available at that time, but would XYZ work for you? Or I'm not going to be available to do that, but I could do this. Right? I don't feel comfortable with that. Or I'm not comfortable with this conversation. I'm not able to commit to that right now, but I'll follow up if something changes. Or let me think about this and I'll follow up with you tomorrow. And I love that one because so many times we feel pressured to give an answer, to commit to something. I mean, think about in the workplace where someone says, well, what do you think we should do? Or I think we should be doing this. This is what we need to be doing. And we feel that pressure to make a decision. And maybe it's not the best decision, right? Or maybe there's people we need to loop into that to keep politics, on the level in the office. So I love just being able to say, let me think about this. These are interesting thoughts. I like to consider them. I'll follow up with you sometime tomorrow. Thank you, but that's not going to work for me. And there are so many more, but I laid some of these out because, especially for women, no is hard. Setting boundaries is hard because it goes against the fairy tale that women are amenable and women are agreeable, that we're going to be accommodating, that we can do it all. So why should we say no? Right? Or we've absorbed that fairy tale of supermom and superwoman. And if I don't say yes to this, then I'm really not able to do everything. And then people are going to judge me. People won't think that I'm good enough. People won't think I'm going to be able to take a raise. And we start buying into this fairy tale. And then what happens? We start feeling tense, we start feeling stressed, we start feeling anxious. And then what happens? We aren't showing up the way that we really need to do the things that we want to do and make sure that the things that are valuable to us are the priorities in our lives. And so these are some simple phrases that I hope will be helpful for you as you move forward and start to set some boundaries. Outside of actually just verbally saying some boundaries, dedicate time for your priority tasks, including self-care. You can take a 20-minute walk. That's fantastic. But what happens if you carve out 30 minutes to exercise at the gym, or you carve out 60 minutes to take a yoga class? For me, I have to carve out 20 or 30 minutes to stretch at some point during the day. I have chronic neck and back pain. I've had it since I was in high school. Sitting all day kills my lower body. Tension right up here is where I keep my tension. kills my upper body. And I know that if I miss a day of just 20 minutes of basic stretching, I am going to be in pain. And that is going to affect how I can concentrate at work the next day. That is going to affect how I can interact with people. So I take that 20 or 30 minutes. That is not negotiable time, whether it's I get up a little bit earlier in the morning or I set aside time before I go to bed at night just to stretch. And that little bit of self-care does absolute wonders for my physical health and for my mental clarity, because I'm a better person for tomorrow and I'm churning out better work. So dedicate time for those priority tasks and maybe write them down, right? Write down, because we have so many. Right? We have them coming from, we have priority tasks coming from our family, our friends, our work, right? Other activities that we're involved in. Everybody is giving you a priority task, but really sit down and figure out what is most important, what is not negotiable, what's kind of important, but could be moved around. There's not a super firm deadline that we need to hit. And then the others, again, get rid of the fairy tale about being super mom or superwoman. They're going to have to be delegated or use one of those boundary setting lines. I'm not available to do this right now, but would X work for you? Or I'm not able to commit to this right now. It's important to me, but I'll follow up with you when something changes. Right? Saying no and setting boundaries isn't mean, right? That again, that's the fairy tale. It is you putting yourself first and doing the things you need to do to be the most awesome spouse, daughter, mother, boss, employee, etc. Right? These are all vital for you to be the best person out in the world. Another suggestion, keep an organized schedule. I don't know about you, everything goes on my calendar. Absolutely everything, even things I have to remember to do at some point that day. And I find that's really helpful because it helps you set boundaries and you can look at something to see, where do I actually have time during today to do that? Maybe you don't. And maybe you think I can take on this project that's due by the end of the day. And then you go back to your desk and you realize you have 10 other things you need to do. And now you're stressed and now you're not getting home in time. Now you're not eating well because you don't have time to stop and grab something to eat and eat something that is nourishing you. And now you're getting frustrated and then you're snapping at your boss. And if you were like me, you go home and snap at the people at home. Ugh, right? Bad cycle, bad cycle. And so if you keep your schedule, you can look, right? Maybe you say, let me think about this and I will follow up with you tomorrow, or let me check my calendar. I'll get back to you in the next hour. And then you can realistically commit to things. And then you know where you're going to have to prioritize or shift things. But you are in charge of your schedule. You're in charge of your own mental, emotional, and physical health. And relinquishing what you cannot do, relinquishing what is going to cause you stress is all part of that. Right. So keep a schedule. You always know what your day looks like, and you can figure out what you realistically have time for and what's going to need to shift. Again, write down your values and your non-negotiables. Right. For me, there's a whole other presentation, but my life took me into a wonderful, fulfilling, happy relationship with a man who actually has 2 children. 2 incredible children in my life. I could not be happier, right? That is my fairy tale. That is what my fairy tale family looks like. I created my own, right? But for me now, after work is cooking dinner with them and probably unsurprisingly giving my academic passions. I'm the homework go-to person now. So it's homework, particularly with his son who's in middle school. That's not negotiable. So if I have work I need to do, I leave by 6 o'clock, right? Computers close. I go there, I cook dinner, I help with homework, and then I'll jump back on, right? One of the organizations that I work with, they don't do weekends, right? So you're not encouraged to work on the weekend. Nobody's sending you emails on the weekend. So unless there's something like exceptional that I'm going to need to put time into work, like we don't work, and we're okay with that, right? You plan your week. And then let that shame go that you're not working on the weekend, or you do what you need to do. But killing ourselves, putting in hours doesn't mean we're productive, right? It doesn't mean we're a happy, healthy employee, right? So write down your non-negotiables. What are you not willing to do? Where are you willing to budge? And then set your boundaries based on that. That will help kind of be your compass for what your boundaries are. Plus, remove yourself from a situation or a relationship if your boundaries are ignored. If people are boundaryless. There are boundaryless people everywhere. You can say no, thank you, and someone will say, but what about this? No, thank you. Well, how come you can't just do this? No, thank you. But I really need you to do this, right? You don't need to keep explaining yourself. And if there's someone in your life, work life, personal life, whatever, who can't respond to that, who is not accepting no, remove yourself. It's not your job to teach them boundaries, right? You set your boundaries of no, I'm sorry, I cannot do that. They keep coming at you, trying to break through your boundaries. Remove yourself without shame, right? You are protecting your own care, right? This is back to self-care. You're protecting your mental and physical and emotional health because you want to wake up being 100%, doing the kick-ass things that you need to do to succeed in the life that you want to create a better world, right? If you're like me, the perpetual altruist, right? You can't do those things if you are not fully healthy, strong inside. So remove yourself, right? If the situation changes, if they evolve, you can reconnect in that relationship. And that one's just, I can't talk about that enough because that was exactly where my journey started. In a relationship with no boundaries and not understanding relationships and the consequences of that, led me to that moment at the kitchen table, right? So remove yourself from those boundaries if they're ignored. Before we take questions, I just want to leave you again with one thought that creating a kinder, more equitable world happens when individuals can find happiness and compassion within themselves. So if you're like me and dismayed at what we're seeing in society, and we don't have a whole lot of hope for where the society is going and the divisiveness and the anger, we're not going to be able to change that until each one of us can find that happiness and compassion within ourselves, because we can't give it to others if we're not feeling that and really genuinely living that internally. Please reach out. I love talking about this topic. I love connecting with other people who have had these experiences or helping people who are going through these experiences. There are a couple different ways to get in touch with me. And I thank you all very, very much for your time and your attention. Please stay in touch, and very happy to take some questions.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Well, I'm just going to get into the chat right now because I did see some questions in there. Let me just get in there. Okay. What are some good ways to identify those core components that you should use as your anchors?
Really great questions. So I think we all know in our guts what is really valuable to us. It's just a question of how do we find that and being open to achieving it in different ways. So that might sound a little vague, but let me give you an example. Something that was really important to me was having very strong, nurturing relationships and feeling like I was in relationships where I was genuinely loved and supported. I could count on other people. And this was after my divorce. And of course, again, people were throwing the fairy tale at me. You got to get out there. You got to date. You got to find another husband. And I'm like, oh, right. I can't even think about this. But there was so much pressure and people just didn't understand. And I was like, no, I'm good. I'm good. Like, I know that's not really a priority for me. I want to take care of myself. And right, every Christmas was like, are you dating somebody? Oh God, like, why is that the only important thing? But the more I reflected on it, like having those relationships were really important to me. But I looked at it through another lens where it didn't have to be with a man or, a spouse. I could nurture those relationships with the people, with the families members in my life. I could create new relationships and really devote time to developing them and being that really good friend and developing that love and support that doesn't need to be romantic, but I'm still achieving that love and support and being able to count on people that I wanted in my life. I just stripped away the fairy tale of it had to come from a man. It had to come from a partner. I want to travel. I think this is a good, very timely example with COVID. I love to travel. I love experiencing other cultures. I love seeing things that I've read about and learned about my entire academic career. And you can't now because the borders are closed in a lot of places. And so that was so disheartening to me. And I really, really struggled with that. But when I stepped back, what was really important to me wasn't necessarily just jet setting around the world. It was immersing myself in culture and connecting with people of other cultures and ethnicities and learning about their way of life and how they see the world. And so I ended up just using social media to connect with people in different parts of the world. My graduate program, I was fortunate where a lot of people were expats or went off to work in other countries, and I was able to stay connected with them. Now, does it replace like going to Rome and walking around the Colosseum? No, but it still fulfilled what was really important to me, which was that connection and learning from others and immersing myself in culture. I started taking French lessons again with a retired French teacher. So that was kind of my connection to a different language and a different culture. So it was pivoting from what I thought I was supposed to be doing, the one specific way that you're supposed to do something, still fulfilling the things that were important to me, like cultural immersion and learning from other people with other backgrounds. I just figured out a new pathway to that. And then that broke down the stress and the disappointment and the shame and all of that. So I hope that answered your question.
Okay, we did have a comment here. I hope my privacy and differences can be respected as long as I am the following. Pleasant, clean, represents the brand well, competent, and effective. But that seems to be a fantasy in many corporations. I felt respected. I could easily deal with all the rest.
Very interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and what I'm taking from that is, you really value respect. That you want to be in an environment where you feel, respected, where you feel included, where differences are included and appreciated. Yes, I think you're correct that that is not fully achieved in many corporations, although I think there's far more dialogue and awareness of it. But maybe, so this is what I tell some of the students that I work with and mentor them on their career path is think about, you don't need to necessarily find that in a corporation or a specific idea of a corporation. Maybe you thought you're going to go into this one type of industry, but there are probably so many places that do respect diversity and inclusion, that do try to create an equitable environment and really respect people. And it might not be what you are aware of right now, but if we open our minds to what else is possible, maybe we end up in a small nonprofit. Maybe we end up creating our own company and creating it in the values that are important to you, like respect, like diversity, like inclusion, like a pleasant, clean environment. That would be my kind of suggestion. You've identified you want to be respected, that you want to be in a respectful environment that is core to you. Hold on to that and keep your eyes open of where else you might be able to find that we don't necessarily talk about in society. I don't know about you, when I talk about big business, I think like Wall Street, right? Fancy corner offices. There's so many other places that are achieving that type of environment that we don't just have to run to like corporate big business to find that job.
Okay.
I hope that answered the question.
Okay, she said, thank you for stating the quiet part out loud. Just having an honest conversation about this topic was awesomely valuable. And she said, thank you. Okay, I do have a question down here. Do you think that letting go of relationships that are toxic and getting new ones with support is the better way to go, even if it's family?
Wholeheartedly, yes. That is my experience. That is my mantra. It's difficult. But again, I think the mindset needs to be, you are the most important person in your life, and you need to do what is going to take care of you. I think you can set boundaries nicely, right? It doesn't have to be, no, screw you. You can set boundaries, but also be aware when those boundaries are just not going to be respected. And if it doesn't feel good and that environment is not changing, you do need to step out of it. I'll share my personal experience after my divorce. There was family who supported my ex, and that was incredibly hurtful. And I told them that is incredibly hurtful. I'm your family. I'm not sure, why I'm not getting your support. And their answers were just not satisfactory to me, and they did not see how hurtful their behaviors were. And so I stepped away from that. And I just said, I'm sorry, I don't agree with what you're saying. I find this very hurtful, and I need to remove myself from this situation for a while. And we didn't interact, right? I adjusted my plans for, family get-togethers so I could feel safe, right? I refused to feel uncomfortable and put myself in a situation just to grin and bear it, right? The fairy tale, grin, bear it, be agreeable, don't start conflict. Well, that was tearing me up inside. And so, yes, it created a slightly uncomfortable situation, but I held to my conviction, I held to my value, and I set a boundary that was realistic. Right? I voiced it, and you shot it down. So my next boundary was I cannot, be a part of activities moving forward. I cannot continue my relationship with you right now. That has since softened. Time has kind of softened things, but I needed to protect myself, and that was my own choice. I think we deal with a lot of toxic relationships in our life. I got into one simply because I bought into those fairy tales. I didn't have the skills to understand boundaries, communication, self-worth, right? You go to college, a guy likes you. Oh, you're supposed to get married. Well, we'll just figure out how to make this work, right? Like, we'll grow up out of college. Oh, well, these problems will just kind of go away. And the problems got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Until I was flat on my back at rock bottom at the end of my relationship. I was like, wow, I was completely unprepared for all that. I didn't know anything. And I had to learn these skills. And I realized how many toxic relationships we just stay in, right? We stay in toxic work environments, right? Because someone wanted to hire us. Yes, I'm just going to take that job, right? Somebody wants me, that feels really good. I'm going to take that job. Or I'm going to stay in this relationship because I'm just going to push through and I'll just get a promotion. I'll move on from this manager. And we remain in these toxic environments, and we start to tell ourselves, well, maybe I am wrong, or it'll just change. Or if I just work a little bit harder, if I just work a little bit longer, I'll get through this. And all that does is disempower and make you smaller and make you more stressed until your head is so spun up, you're just surviving day to day. You're not actually thriving. You're not in charge of your life. So identify those relationships. Again, your body will tell you when you're in them. You will feel them, and remove yourself, right? You are the most important person in your life. You need to take care of that.
Okay, let me see what's next. I've had quite a few comments here. So I just give me 1 second. Let me see. What are safe ways to do virtual foreign friends? I love to travel also and love this option that you mentioned.
Oh, yes, another fellow traveler. So there are a couple different groups that I'm involved in. There's a group called PCDN that really focuses on helping people who want to get into like advocacy and nonprofit and kind of agents of change careers. They've done some great virtual workshops. A lot of them are free. I check out LinkedIn for PCDN and like Nagle. I check out things on LinkedIn, or I find like international groups. And I've been able to connect actually some really interesting people, hear some really interesting speakers, and then have people ask to connect with me afterwards. And I just kind of started forming relationships, and we'll do like a virtual Zoom to chat a little bit more. There are tons of nonprofits to get involved in also. Some of the ones that I keep my closest eye on are organizations for refugees. Or there are groups that are coming. I'm in New Jersey. There are groups that are coming into New Jersey. If you have an opportunity and you feel okay going out in public and interacting with other people right now, those are some great ways to immerse yourself in other cultures and help people immerse into ours. Right? These are folks who have gone through unimaginable difficulties and life transitions and are just dealing with the horrible things life have thrown at them. And they just want to come here and be in a safe place and survive. And I think if we can extend our help to them and help them get settled, we get so much back from it and can learn from them and their cultures and, help them assimilate into our community. So there's just a couple ways I think you can continue those connections and start to expand your network globally until we can all travel normally again.
Okay, they just wanted to ask, what was the website for PCDN?
PCDN, I'll see if I can find their website. PCDN Global is their name. And my internet is not coming up, but here we go. They're actually based out of Colombia, but they're a global firm. Yeah, PCDN Global.
Very good, thank you. A lot of nice comments. Boundaries.
Yeah, thank you. Oh my God, this means so much, and it does feel good to know that I'm not alone in the world dealing with these fairy tales and feeling these pressures.
Well, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for all the audience, your participation, your questions. This has been a very nice hour that we spent together today. So I want to thank you, Kelly, again, for coming and speaking to our group today. We're facing a lot of challenges because we're all supply chain here, so they've had a lot of stress.
Oh yeah.
So I thought this was a really good program, but thank you again for everybody that came to join us today. I just want to let everybody know that we are recording this, and we will be sending out the recording a little bit later today after I get it posted. And everybody does get continuing education credit for attending us today as well. Tomorrow, we're actually having another program with Graham Croshaw. He's with CASMA, and he will be speaking on the value beyond savings, and that's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So again, I'd like to thank everybody and have a great afternoon, everybody. And thank you again, Kelly, for joining us today.
Thank you all. Happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.